Okay, so for the next part of this sort of Marvelous Designer to DAZ Workflow, I want to test the mesh. So it's like an initial rig just to make sure the mesh works kind of right, doesn't need any adjustments. This one I happen to know needs an adjustment or two, so I'm going to show you how to do that too. So I'm in DAZ Studio. I'm going to load my G9 figure, which is what I've made the dress for. If you haven't seen the dress making video, I'll link it somewhere around. But for the moment, let's wait for it. There we go. So now we've got Genesis 9 in, I can import my mesh. So it's File and Import. G9 Dress is what I saved it as. I use the meters workflow, or the meters units, so Modo is 1 meter, and that's all good. Okay, all those other things are fine, so I'll just click OK, and that brings the dress in. Okay, so what I'm looking for is whether the mesh looks nice and whether it conforms or fits the figure without an awful lot of distortion. I can already see it's a little bit raised from the body, so we're going to adjust that in MD, but let's do an initial rig. So let me select the dress first. Well, actually no, I want to select Genesis first because I've had some crashes with other things selected, and then we'll go to where we go, Assets and Transfer Utility. So I want the Genesis 9 as my from item, and the dress is the to item. And because we made the dress on the template, on the tight dress template, I'm going to use the tight dress template, or long dress long tight template as my template. So two reasons. Well, one reason mainly, this has the right weight maps for this kind of garment. If I did it with like the bodysuit, then it's going to split the legs, and that's not ideal. But this is going to give me a good starting point, and because I've used the dress template to model over, this is going to fit quite well, and it's going to project well. So let's hit accept on that, let it do its thing. There we go. If I open up Genesis now, the dress is parented and we can see how it works. So with Genesis selected, I'm just going to go and find some base poses and just run it through a few poses to see how it goes. So let's have this one. That looks quite nice. Because we used the dress template to project from, we've got a nice smooth transition there. There's no splits or nasty jaggedy pieces. That's doing quite well. I'm quite happy with that. Let's have a bit of a more of a stride. I've got a bit of poke through there. There's not an awful lot I can do about that. That may figure itself out if I put smoothing on. So let's do that now actually. So with the dress selected, we go edit and geometry and add smoothing modifier, and now you can see that that pops out quite nicely. There we go. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. So what else can we apply? Well, let's have this really extreme running pose, and that does really nicely as well. I find that now, using the template to make my model, or to help me make my model as my reference, and then using the projection template really helps with this stage. A lot of the time, if you don't use those, if you use just Genesis or you use no template at all, you'll spend quite a lot of your time smoothing maps and having a right old time of it. Okay, so let me just restore the figure pose there. There we go. Now the other thing I'm looking for with the smoothing modifier is that it's not pulling at any particular areas. Actually, it's the smoothing modifier and subdivision. So if I apply subdivision to this, so with the dress selected, I am going to go to edit geometry and convert to sub D. There we go. And what I'm looking for is that the shape of the dress isn't changing. My hems are still nice and straight, and the only real way to see that is to go to a wireframe view. So I can still see that down here, you know, nothing's pulling, nothing's getting particularly distorted, so that's nice. So another thing to do is to apply those normal maps we created. So that will give us another clue. So let me go just to texture shaded for a moment. I'll use the selection option there, the material zone option, and go and find the normal maps down here somewhere, and browse, and I'll load in my normal map. If I switch now over to the iRay view, I'll see if I've put the right map on the right place. I have. There we go. And let's pick the other one, normal map, browse, and pop the other one on. And with sub D on, if you had an issue, you would see that there would be kind of pulls and such like against these, and there's a little bit going on there, so we might do something to deal with that. And also I have a normal right down the middle, which I knew I would have, but I'm going to get rid of it. Same with the back. Okay, so the next thing to do is to open our Marvelous Designer file. Just make some tweaks, and then we'll do a re-export. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so I'm back into Marvelous Designer to do some adjustments. So first of all, I want to get rid of these seams down the front and back, and maybe the collar. I don't know, I quite like it on the collar, but yeah, down on this hem. So you do that by going to edit sewing, and you select the seam on the piece that you want to adjust. So that's this seam down the middle here for the front, and under 3D seam line we set our thickness to 0. There we go, and it's disappeared. And similarly, if I go around the back, I'll set that to 0 as well. Now that's done. And on the hem, on this side to side piece, and set that to 0 too. There we go. So everything's nice, only the collar is showing a seam, and that's good. Well, I mean the panels are showing a seam, but that's where I want it to be. Okay, so what else? So in the if we go back to DAZ, down here I may have some pulling, and also I notice that if I go to the wireframe view here, oops, not that one, the wire shaded, there we go, there's actually not much geometry going down here, and that's making it quite stiff. So what we're going to do is add some geometry down here to both brace it and increase the geometry. So in MD I want to go to edit pattern and select my lines. It's those two. We're still in symmetric mode, so it's going to do it down this side as well, and I'm going to right click and offset as internal line. Now I don't want it to go very far, so 0.05 maybe. So that is going to add a layer of polygons there, and if I increase that, say 2 or 3, it's going to give me 3 polygons, and that's going to give it enough to bend a little bit more naturally. So if I click OK on that, just going to click off there, and we'll have a look at the wireframe of the mesh view. So you see now I've got mesh, split. Adding those internal lines has split the mesh a little bit and given me a little bit of extra geometry to work with, and that will both brace it and make it a little bit smoother. So I'm going to turn off the preview there, so I don't want to show internal lines. There we go. Now if you keep an eye here, we should see this change when I set these sim off. There we go. You see that flattened out quite nicely, and has given us a nice curve there rather than that big thick kind of view. Okay, so other than that, what could we do? I think everything else looks pretty much okay. There was one thing. Let me do Shift A to get my avatar back. It's a little high off the mesh, even though my offset to skin is 0. It's still a little high, and that's because there is also an offset on these pieces. So I don't necessarily want to do the whole garment, but this piece where it's going to be really sharp, that distance, I can make an adjustment. So if I go to transform pattern, I'm going to select both these pieces, and under here we have add thickness collision. So it's got a 2.5mm collision on there, and I can set that down even further. So if I set it to 1 and let it sim, we should see it start getting closer. That was quite subtle there. If I set it to 0, it should get closer again. Doesn't appear to be behaving, so what I'm going to do is actually do it for all of these pieces. I could just select up here, I suppose, if I was being bright. Actually, I realised my my error. These pieces are actually here, but on the outside, and they are keeping that away. So I need to set these down to 0 also. And there you go. Now you can see it's nice and snug. The collar, we might have a similar thing. If you want that to be a bit tighter, you might need to adjust your elasticity. So I think the elastic may have turned off when we cut it. There we go, so that's back on again. I think 90 is probably enough, maybe even 95. 95 is too much. Let's go 90. There we go. Okay, so that's tightened it up. We might do that down here also, because it's going to raise a bit off the leg. So I would have to do this piece as well, of course. So if I put that down to 0, that should tighten up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's tidying up the mesh, and of course now I haven't really changed any of the positions or anything, so the maps are going to be okay, but I am going to export them because there is a slightly different geometry going on. So I need to select all the pieces that I want, do a file and an export of OBJ selected. I'm going to overwrite this one because I don't want it anymore. Let that finish. So single object, weld, thin, unified, that's all good. And then I'm just going to go, just to be sure, and export our normal map again. So it's 4096. I want it into that directory. Just need to call it G9 dress. G9 dress. All tiles, normals, and save. Come on, there we go. Okay, so now we have a new dress to test in here. Let's see if it looks any better. So we'll do that in the next one. Okay, so I'm back in DAZ Studio now, and I'm just going to unparent the dress. So unparent, and then let's make sure it's not fitted to anything. Where's fit gone? Oh well, never mind. Right, let's see if I can move this. That's not the dress, that's the dress. Ah, because it's still fitted. Of course it's still fitted. Ah, now it gives me the option. Change parent, no parent, right click, fit to, none. There we go, accept. And now it's moved. Excellent. So I just want to keep that there to see the difference in, you know, between that and our new dress. So, whoops, that's the wrong button. So let's file and import, and pick the new dress and accept. This appears not to be at 0 anymore. Let's go to parameters. There we go. Sorry, that's my fault. I managed to move it in the process of checking things. Okay, so I can already see that this sort of ugly bulge here has gone, and it's flattened out, and we've got a much nicer line. If I go to surfaces, let's add our normal maps back. Where is it? It's that one. Okay, so this is, where is it? Where's it gone? There it is. Browse. So I think that one was that one. It is. And this one will be the other one, of course. There we go. So now we don't have the seam down the middle, which is good. There we go. And we've got our normal seams where they should be. Not entirely sure that that's right. Let me have a look. Let's go and have a look in that folder and look at those normal maps. So projects, it's in my G9 folder. Address, and let's open that up. Yeah, no, it looks right. And that looks right too. Lovely. Okay, so yes, I think it looks better. We've got a much sharper line down here, which is nice. It's a bit of a poser really, because there's some things I like about this one that aren't showing on this one. This line down the bottom here looks far more organic and nice. It's just over the breast it looks a bit strange and weird, whereas this looks a bit tight. So you kind of have to, you know, gauge it yourself essentially, whatever's right to you know, for you. So let me add our conformer to this. So it's assets, transfer utility, we want G9, we want the long tight dress template and G9 dress there, and accept. There we go. I'm going to delete that now and just apply a few poses to this to see how it's going. It's not too bad. I haven't added the smoothing modifier yet, so let's add smoothing and sub D. So it's edit geometry smoothing and edit geometry, whoops, edit geometry, come on, and convert to sub D. There we go. So yes, that little bit of bracing has really smoothed up this line. It's much more defined now. It isn't being pulled left and right. So yeah, I'm happy with that. And it looks to be closer to the skin, which is perfect. So yeah, I'm pretty much happy. Excuse me. Now the reason I did all that is because if you have to make changes to your dress, you know, once you get so far down the line of a process, you may lose all your work. You may have to redo some things. So for example, I would like to texture this now, whereas, you know, if I textured it and then tested my mesh and found I had some problems, you know, it's better to fix those problems first, and it saves me time later. So this little intermediate stage gives you an idea that your mesh is good, that it's going to do what you want it to do, and that you're not going to get too many problems in the future. So I'm content with this mesh now. You could go even further, you know, and rig some of the later steps, like add some, you know, morphs and JCMs and such like. The one thing I actually haven't checked on this, and I'm going to reset her pose now, there we go, is I want to see how this works with some of the morphs. So if I go to shaping and down to people, we can turn on the feminine and see how that goes. So there we are, that works quite nicely. We can turn on Victoria, and that's pretty good. And we can have a look at the male. And that comes pretty good too. This is giving me unisex, you know, sci-fi vibes now. Okay, so the next thing I'll do, or the next video I'll make, is the texturing one, because that's what I like to do next, to get it looking nice. And then after that we'll go on to do some more rigging steps. This is essentially an initial rig, just to see if it's working as it should do, that there's nothing in particular that I have to, you know, work on. You know, some things that you might find you work on is the weight maps for the arms, for example, but I've kept these deliberately far away from the arms so I don't have to really do that. So let me just make sure, if I bend that up, see, that's working quite nicely. It's not pulling anything horribly out of space. Similarly, if I bend that up, it's not grabbing anything from the dress and pulling it up. If you get it too close to the arm, you know, sometimes it pulls some geometry with it, which, you know, I don't want, because I want a relatively simple example for you, you know, so you don't get too frustrated like I did. Right, okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful, and I'll talk to you when we get onto the texturing.